Well, everyone, coming live from Florida and San Diego, two fabulous places to be, is Connor Hogan with us today from OnePlanet. Connor, you are co-founder, CFO of OnePlanet, doing a lot in solar recycling, because I guess we now need to recycle all the things we're building with solar, because that's been happening a lot. Welcome and hi.
Hey Beck, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm more than happy to get into the weeds about solar and the coming recycling wave ahead of the industry.
Ooh, it's okay. Tell us about this wave coming, because if you were, for example, a child of the 80s, such as myself, or 90s, we all clipped the little the can stuff to make sure the sea turtles didn't die. And I think we've been bombarded, with your recycle, you got to recycle, you got to recycle. Like all of us have known, you recycle every aluminum can you have ever touched. What is this wave coming that you're describing?
Yeah, and so I still cut the Gatorade bottle.
That's right.
And the Coke can bottle holder. So 100% feel you on that. Always been an environmentalist at heart. I got into solar, and back then there really wasn't a lot of, I don't want to say there wasn't a lot of planning, but everybody's focus really was get the solar in the ground as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And so it kind of became an afterthought. And so after, a couple of years of working at Goldman in their flagship renewables fund, it was really obvious. We started to get local pushback. And so
no, what do you mean by local pushback? You mean just local authorities were like, we don't need to touch that. We don't need to recycle it, or
kind of the opposite, where they were using the lack of a recycling plan as a way to kind of stymie the progress. So they would try to use that as a way to kind of hold back your ability to get a permit or to get a zoning verification for these large scale projects. But that for me was the light bulb moment that, hey, if you want to continue to grow at this really high trajectory, you're going to have a comprehensive end of life solution. Fortunately, it's not an overly complicated product to recycle. At the end of the day, it's made up of glass, aluminum, copper, silicon.
All things we want. Yeah.
All things we definitely need, especially with this whole AI era, right? And so if you think about it, from a process standpoint, we get a panel and we break it back up into its core components. And really, the way I describe it to a lot of people, it's almost like making a panel, but in reverse.
Yeah.
So you're essentially the front half of our facilities. They take it apart in kind of a automated mechanical fashion rather. And then the back half is more of a shredding and granulation, where you're really using density and size to figure out what's plastic versus what's silicon, versus what's copper. So in a nutshell, that's the way that the process works. And next couple of years, we're going to start to see some of the first really, really large scale facilities come offline.
Okay, so that's my next question. Why? Because we don't want to do solar anymore? No, we want to keep increasing the efficiency of panels. What's the why of how this evolution is coming upon us?
There's a couple different reasons. And so it's really specific to the situation. So on one hand, if you have an older asset that's say 10 to 15 years old, likely a lot of times what happens is the inverter or something else on the site, if it's a rooftop site, like on top of a Home Depot or a Walmart or a Kroger, typically speaking, what happens is when the roofs have to get replaced, the system owner is going to say, well, I have these old panels that are, from 10 years ago, there's been a huge increase in panel capacity. And so the productivity or the efficiency of the panels nowadays are also, they're cheaper than they were 10 years ago, and they're like 2-3 times more efficient. So a lot of these owners at that inflection point typically do like a relatively simplistic ROI on whether or not it's worth to get those newer panels put on. Another big driver is tax credits. So a lot of people are trying to lock in those tax credits. It's the same type of logic that I just talked about, but it's really been a matter of making sure that, is it worth us replacing the system to claim the tax credits? And then the last one, at a pretty general level, even when you build a plant, you get construction breakage, you get, stuff that gets damaged in transit or damaged during the manufacturing process. And so a lot of those owners, typically, they just want a responsible, the solar industry is really proactive about being responsible stewards of the land and the areas that they work in. And so a lot of times the owners are just looking for a responsible end of life solution.
Yeah. Because what's the default right now? You chuck it in the trash, you don't recycle. What are you doing?
So the default for a long time was pretty much that. I mean, you could
Yeah.
either take it to a landfill. Fortunately, it was really low volumes, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like it
Because
was a
there wasn't
huge,
this. Yeah. We weren't in a
yeah,
solar boom.
yeah, exactly. Very,
Yeah.
very, very low volume relative to where we're heading in the next couple of years. So typically speaking, you could either take it to a landfill. That can be a challenge based on where you are and the classification of that waste stream. Alternatively, people would take it to just like a generic scrapyard where really the only thing that's actually getting recovered is that aluminum. And so you need really these pure play, outfits or operations that are designed to do everything from take the glass off, because all of the goodies in a panel, so to speak, like the silver and the copper, that's sandwiched between the layers of glass and plastic. So you really got to have specialized equipment that are recycling, a conventional run of the mill recycling yard just doesn't have.
Also, aren't those great things that we of value that you want, like 100%. Copper, like aluminum, like that's valuable stuff to get your hands back on.
Yeah, especially with the whole, like I said, the AI data center build out. The amount of copper and silver and aluminum that goes into those is really just unbelievably eye-poppingly large amount of metal.
Yeah. So Connor, you're a relatively new dad. We heard the baby in the background. You came from traditional finance. You saw this opportunity, but what are you doing this for, sir? Because it is crazy to be, although there's a trend going on right now, I have to say, of newer founders, also in the family mode, young kids, you're drinking your coffee, you're trying to stay alive. And I'm just like, man, what is this era of people doing the craziness of doing a startup and then getting married in most cases, having kids, it's like, it's all the things all at once on the dance card.
I'm not going to say it's not a little bit crazy because I think it 100% is. And so fortunately, I didn't have the parental experience before starting this. I had only had a couple months of it.
Okay.
Fortunately, I'd been in the startup world before. So I was like one of the early employees at Pine Gate. And then this fund at Goldman, I was one of the first couple of
Pine Gate renewals.
Yeah. So I kind of got to see the S curve of growth for startups. So I was a little familiar with the
shenanigans.
Yeah, but not from a co-founder perspective though, right? And like that's really where you start to there's a whole different level of responsibility with that. I wasn't really fully aware of it. I just knew that from me having been in renewables, I viewed it as, hey, I've touched, at that point in time, probably 2.5% of all of the solar in some way, shape, or form that was installed in the country from my time at Pine Gate and then at Goldman. So I just felt really, to me, it was a project of passion, and I'm glad that I pursued it that way, because when you talk to founders all the time, you just can't do this if you're not like you have to be totally invested in the topic.
You gotta be crazy.
Yeah, you have to really be head over heels with what you're doing. And so when I started the company, we had our firstborn, and he was just over a year old.
Wow.
And then I think it was about, it was only like 3 months into founding the company that I had my second born. So I had a newborn since we started the whole company. And so I was woefully unprepared for the parental life and what comes with that. But
wow, good on you, man. Good on you. Okay, so truly, how do you do it?
So, I have a hard stop on my calendar every day from 5 to 8. And I set that as that's the family time. So we do dinner every single night. I make sure to get a good solid hour or two in with the kids and play and do the bedtime routine. I make sure that then after that, I usually work for another hour or two after that. And then I try to maximize the shoulders is the way I would call it. So when I first wake up in the morning and it's just me or my wife who are up, I get that coffee and I'm straight to the computer for at least the first 2 hours if I can get it out.
Wait a second. You said you try to maximize the shores?
The shoulders.
Oh, the shoulders of the day. Shoulders of the
time. Yeah. That's kind of, I guess that's the way I would describe it, is that to me those are really crucial windows in the day. And then the weekends, it's, that's really a juggle. It depends on what's going on, but that and some good, some mental health exercises. Fortunately, we have a good bit of property where I live, so I get to go outside and play with the kids on a decent sized lawn, which I know not everybody has. Like a lot of my friends have to go to parks and stuff like that. Totally, but it's an everyday battle.
It's an everyday battle. So, but you're surviving. Look at you.
I
Look at you.
think
Okay,
I've
so
aged a good bit, Beck.
this is part of the fun. This is part of the fun.
Yeah.
So you said some mental health, tactics and things you do. So, for example, yes, the blocking of the time of you just religiously know, let's say, from 5 to 8, that's my offline time, family time, full blast. That's great. So like strong boundaries. But what else to just keep your head not from exploding?
I used to fly and not read, and I totally regret it. Like I can't believe how just yeah, like it was. I had a lot of people, who always had recommended it, and I just in the past 2 years, having done this, I've really started to get. I've gotten very religious with that. So like if I get on a plane, I make sure I have a good book. I've really enjoyed that. That helps a lot with the travel. Same with when I go to the hotel, if I don't finish it in the flight, something still.
Yeah.
So I've gotten a lot more into reading with this, which you wouldn't expect to do because it's like you have all this time with the business and the demands there. But like I've really started to enjoy reading, and so
it's
I've
so
done that.
analog too. So you're talking like you're holding the physical pages, right?
Textbook,
That's right.
pages with ink. Yeah.
Yes. We have a reading club at BAM for exactly this
nice.
point. We call it, I call it a brainwash on Thursdays that we do. It's just to like analog level, crack open the book. It's such a joy. It's such like a luxury.
Yeah, the smell of a good book. Like there's something about the physical, like you said, the opening the pages and the wafting up.
You don't have to convince me. But you're talking to the choir here. Oh yeah. Oh, it's great. Okay, +1 for the books. Then putting the book in your hand on a flight too, because yes, you're in the sky. No one can get you. It's great. Got you. How about what recently became clear as you've been doing this path?
I think for our business, or to tie this close to home for us, what I would say is that there's a lot of talk about like US versus China. That's a big, the geopolitical spectrum is
intense.
Yeah. And, the way I've kind of thought about this lately is that I do really think that like US private capital is going to really struggle to catch up with China on the manufacturing front. And I used to be a lot more bullish, and I've kind of walked that back a little bit because I just think it's very different risk frameworks between like, if you look at like, if you look at like Chinese investors and capital, like they have a much more risk tolerant appetite than a lot of Western private capital. And so I think that I think that a lot of the US and the EU, they have this ambition to kind of unseat the Chinese chokehold on manufacturing and like primary production. And I've lately kind of questioned if the risk appetite is there though. And so I hope that's clear, but that's something that lately I've really been thinking about because I see it a lot on LinkedIn where like, private equity or venture capital people are like, oh, I just came back from China and this, that, and the other. And so, but then they talk about like the requirements for investment, and it's like, well, I don't know if the Chinese are necessarily thinking about it in the same context. Like they're not looking for a perfect investment. They're more taking a position in a market, and then they're comfortable with running, 2-3 years of losses. And the state mechanisms aside, like I think at the end of the day, there's a pretty big difference between the two types of capital, I guess.
Oh, completely. Well, the biggest thing is, and if you read any books on China versus the US and so forth, China plays in centuries.
Yeah.
The US plays in 12
decades.
Months.
Yeah.
Maybe a decade, 4 years,
maybe.
a quarter, or 4 years, 2
Mhm.
years, depending on,
an election cycle.
And that cuts off a lot from our development in that. At the same time, and I love this, by the way, like at the same time, we're a blip on the radar as it relates to as a country, in relation to so many other countries like China, where you're like, well, we got thousands of years under you guys. You've been here, 250.
Yeah.
Like, a blip, but then there's beauty to that, of course. I'm a big fan of America, but just like, wow.
I do think that we're resilient.
Strategy.
Yeah. Like I think that there is like, it's not to say that we can't, I just think that like there has to be a change in mentality. And like, I think that's the big thing for me is that people, and I'm glad that people are going to visit China because I think that's actually I think that's where like the dots start to connect for a lot of people.
To get the wake up call because things are blazingly modern over in China. That is astounding. Yes. Okay, so that recently became clear. Yeah. I don't know how you're talking about a cultural shift cultural shifts are, man, decades, if not generations in the making. So
Yeah.
we'll see, Connor. We'll see.
Fingers
Okay.
crossed.
We'll see. Man. How about what's your latest unlock? I mean, you mentioned, I think one of them is like touch grass every day. You're touching grass with your kids. Like that could be like an unlock. But is there an unlock you've had in the last couple of months, even that you're like, wow, this I really figured out. Here it is.
Yeah, having gone through am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry. I would say having gone through some of the fundraising cycles, I've really learned to appreciate, because formerly being an investor, not in VC, but just having been in like the investment world, investors are really, really, really intelligent people. Like you don't become an investor unless you have a very firm grasp on the subject you're touching, but a lot of times when you're the operator, you get so wrapped up in the details.
Oh yeah.
That one of the powers of delivery is dumbing it down. And like I've struggled with that because I'm so into the weeds with what I'm doing, and I like it so much that it's hard to take. It's hard. It's a real skill to take a very, very complicated subject and distill it into a first grader type of explanation. And that to me has been an unlock lately, is to, before you speak, I try to put it in a way that my oldest child could understand. That's been tough for me, but I think I've gotten a lot better at it. But that's definitely something as a founder that, especially a first-time founder, it's a muscle memory skill, I think, that you get better at as time goes on.
+1 to this, because I cannot tell you, Connor, how many founders will take 17 minutes to tell you the answer to why do you all exist, and you still don't have a clear answer at the end of that question. And there lies the emphasis and truth of great communication, which is that Mark Twain quote that I love, which if I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. Being succinct is difficult. And I'm also a big fan of what we've been using more in BAM, and such as just bluff, bottom line up front. Listen, everyone's busy. Clients are busy. I'm freaking busy. Oh, we're all busy. But like, what is the bottom line up front? Okay, now we can go through the details and stuff. But yeah, summing it down, shortening it up. Man.
Yeah, that's been a big unlock. Reading helps with that too.
I agree.
Reading will help with that.
Yes, yes. By the way, do you do nonfiction, fiction? What's your diet like?
I'm like 90-10 nonfiction, fiction. So fiction for me, I'm very, very specific with. Like it has to be like semi. I don't know I'm gonna butcher this, but it has to be like semi-real. If it's fiction, it has to be it has to be plausibly real world. And that probably says a lot about me. As a kid, I used to be very, very fiction heavy. But as I've gotten older, I've tended to be more nonfiction and yeah. So.
Fiction's so juicy though. There's been a lot of reports that have come out lately on just like how it's helpful for your creativity and your thinking and So maybe you can increase your fiction.
I probably should.
Yeah. I'm such you don't need to convince me of storytelling. So yeah. Oh, got you. Okay. Connor, what's the biggest thing on your mind right now? You mentioned, we were talking earlier, your ABR, always be raising. So you're in fundraising mode.
Am 150% in fundraising mode.
Yep.
I would say I've thought a lot lately about the political climate.
Yes.
That's been a big thing that
What a time to be alive.
Yeah. We're in a very whiplash political environment. And then once you start to then think about that in context of running a business, it's very challenging because in our world, frankly, we kind of have the benefit of both. It seems like both sides of the political aisle are pretty focused on onshoring critical metals. Biden had a lot of programs that got started up that,
of course,
in some way, shape, or form continue, but most of which they got, unfortunately cut with Trump.
Yeah.
And then Trump has kind of taken it in his own approach and tried to do the Project Vault thing. and a lot of the critical mineral type work they've been focused on. But I don't think I'm very upset that they discontinued the 45X tax credits, because to me it's like these super good these awesome gems of policy that are designed, like if you want to go and try and compete with China, like I thought the 45X was a great way to go do it, and then it gets cut for purely political partisan reasons. That to me is kind of like that's pretty counterproductive. Like you guys really probably should have,
maybe met about this, maybe talked about this. By the way, this is Section 45X Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit.
Yes.
That was part of the Inflation Reduction Act in 22. So there you go for everybody.
So that's I say it's political. A lot of the political whiplash, it doesn't really seem to help. And it's sad too, because both parties are focused on the same thing here.
Connor, this is why I'm a big fan of business people in politics. Business people.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that you get a little bit less
mayhem.
Yeah, I think you'd get a little bit more proactive or pragmatic decision making. But yeah, I tend to agree with that.
You don't need to preach more to the choir. Yes. Okay, Connor, what's exciting for you coming up? Don't say fundraising. We know that's not the answer.
I'm gonna skip fundraising.
Yeah, we're not putting that. It's not fun. Although you had an earlier quote, which was what? It's the most fun time you'll have that you never want again, or something.
Yes, it's an old. So that was the phrase in college, but and my dad has used it with military as well. It's like it's the most fun you'll never want to have again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my take there.
Yep.
Here's how I guess I'll weave this story together. I think that I'm really excited for team building. I am all about bringing together the best people, and it's funny.
It's so fun.
Yeah, and like it's really rewarding too, is what I've come to realize. Is like when I think about myself back at Pinegate, I was fresh out of college. And at that time, James Luster was the sole founder of Pinegate, and he just let us do. He just was like, "Here's a blank canvas. Do what you want to go do." And like that was the best way, is because it liberates you, and then you almost have something to prove. And so it was good. A lot of nostalgia there for me, and thinking about how you build teams and like what makes a successful team. And so I'm really excited to grow the team at OnePlanet.
There's nothing like having your people with you. And Connor, I will say something consistent on this theme with people who have founderitis. They come back, they do the second startup, the third startup. They don't need to do it financially. They're just doing it for the fun. One of the reasons, contributing factors, is because you're doing it again with the people you love to work with.
Yep.
And you spend so much time in work and building things that matter, because it takes time. And it's fun. It's fun when you work with. It's hard, but it can be fun when you're working with the people you so enjoy. So yes. Connor, thank you for being on today. Our little coffee with the founder, even though I'm not drinking coffee, but it looks like you're still drinking it to get through the day. So Godspeed.
I figured with a title like Coffee with the Founder, I'd be
unequipped. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Connor Hogan, he is the co-founder and CEO of OnePlanet, making all those solar panels get recycled. A lot of material in the solar panels. I love it. Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it.